Hello and welcome to Quarantine Zone, a podcast for HBO's The Last of Us. We are your hosts, Andrew Sorsini,
Dwayne D,
and Tosin Andy.
We just watched the 5th episode of the 2nd season of The Last of Us, titled Feel Her Love. We assume you have as well. Total spoilers ahead. Let's dive into the aftertalk. But first, we've got some online spots where you can get in contact with us. You can write us an email or a voice memo at quarantinezonepod@gmail.com. Follow us on X and Blue Sky at QZPod. Add us on iTunes and Spotify. Like us, leave us a review. That's how we get noticed. But as always, word of mouth is the best way that you can spread the word and tell your friends. This episode is written by Craig Mazin and directed by Stephen Williams, who also directed episodes of Watchmen, Westworld, and a ton of episodes of Lost, and also produced a ton of episodes of Lost. Dwayne, why don't you give us a recap of this episode?
Sure thing. We open with Hanrahan and her WLF team. She's staring at a door that's barricaded. She goes into a new room with another commander, Elise, who's being killed because of being accused of killing her own men, including Leon, who's her son. Elise says that she learned that the ground floor, the basements, were infected with airborne cordyceps, so they sealed the team down there in the basement. Her son was leading the team, and he asked her to seal him in, and so she's dealing with his loss. Then we move to day 2 for Seattle for Ellie and Dina. They're in the theater that the two are holed up in. Dina's digesting the information coming in over the radio and trying to use that info, all the chatter, to find a safe way to get to the hospital undetected. Meanwhile, Ellie explores the theater complex and finds that the electricity can be turned on, and she discovers the concert hall. They get back together and they head out. They find some dead Seraphites in the streets, with graffiti around them. And Ellie has reservations about taking Dina into battle with the WLF, but Dina assures Ellie that if she dies, it's not on Ellie, it's on her. They sneak across town, no guns, knives or run is their plan. Once they get into a building that they know is not being patrolled by the WLF, they come across another stalker infected, and it turns out that the building is teeming with these infected, these stalkers. Ellie manages to distract several as Dina takes refuge in sort of an industrial cage thing. Their earlier rule about not using guns flies out of the window as they defend themselves. Jesse shows up and helps them escape from the stalkers. They leave the building, but once they do, they're immediately spotted by the WLF. They run from them and they seek refuge in the natural cover of an overgrown park. Once they get into the park, they realize the WLF don't follow them because it's Seraphite territory. Jesse tells Dina and Ellie that he and Tommy snuck out of Jackson as soon as they realized where Dina and Ellie went. He was able to find them in the abandoned building with the stalkers because Dina left her triangulation map and notes in the theater that they had used as shelter. Tommy is supposed to rendezvous with Jesse tomorrow. After seeing the Seraphites brutally disembowel and hang a captured WLF member, the three are discovered by the scars. Dina's wounded in the leg by a crossbow bolt, and Jesse carries her off while Ellie causes a distraction that gives Dina and Jesse cover. Ellie manages to evade the Seraphites that are looking for her and finds that the park backs up into the hospital she's looking to infiltrate. Despite being almost discovered by a WLF canine unit dog, Ellie finds her way into the hospital and confronts Nora, one of the women who aided Abby in drugging Dina and killing Joel. Nora gets away from Ellie initially, sounds the alarm. As Ellie chases Nora, they end up in the area that has airborne cordyceps, the area that Elise Park had shut down and locked her son inside of. Ellie attempts to elicit information regarding Abby's whereabouts from Nora violently. And then finally, we see a flashback to Ellie and Joel and Jackson, where they were still amicable. He walks into her room to wake her, and she's happy to see him. And that's the episode.
Yeah, it's a lot there. It's not a very long episode, 45 minutes compared to some of the other episodes. But
it took me forever to watch the episode.
Why is that? Give me your impressions of the episode, and then why did it take you so long?
Well, I'll let Tosin start with the impressions, but I will say that I was scared. I had to pause it.
Yes. Tosin, what were your initial impressions of this episode?
Yeah, I think this episode was quite interesting. because there was definitely a divergence from how they from the game a bit more than you had seen in prior episodes, and so I think that part made it kind of unique and novel, as well as the we'll get into some of the real meat and potatoes of it, but I think one of the things that I also found compelling here is the title, Feel Her Love. In this episode, we clearly see Ellie feeling Dina's love and vice versa. And there's some more we can latch on in there and discuss in further detail later in this episode. But on the flip side, we also know that the Seraphites feel their love for their mother, which is why they commit such atrocities in her name. So quite interesting there.
Maybe also a little bit of irony in that Nora got to feel Ellie's love for her at the end of this episode.
I'm going to get into that. So getting onto the Feel Her Love, the whole thing is, Park's son doesn't get to feel the love of his mom, and Jesse no longer has the romantic love of Dina. The Prophet deals her love directly to the WLF member, who gets disemboweled and freed. And Nora feels Ellie's love for Joel every time that the pipe strikes her body. And as she suffocates into an infected state via the airborne cordyceps. And of course, Ellie gets to feel Dina's love in Dina's professed determination to stay together come what may. So it's a title that at first just kind of seems like a reference to the Seraphite situation.
Right.
But it's there's kind of layer upon layer upon layer there. And like I said, I was freaked out. It's, what it was? It was the way the stalkers worked together, it seemed.
Yeah, very organized.
It was an organized thing, and it's one thing, experiencing it in the game. It's another thing when you watch the faces of the actors and the characters they're playing, discover it. It's new to them. You're screaming, "Get out of there!" And they're like, "What's going on?" Pretty much tragedy ensues. So that was pretty good. Anyway, Andy, what were your impressions?
This is I feel like this is a really foundational episode here, because it indicates this huge shift in Ellie's character, where we've really seen her express the darkest parts of her nature, and I think this is going to spin Ellie off into a new direction from here on out. But overall, I felt like there was a really nice balance in this episode between the light banter between Ellie and Dina, which I really love. I really love their chemistry together, the rapport together. It feels very
love, right?
Yeah. But also like BFFs also.
That's some of the best parts of Young Love. What's interesting also is the fact that you said that for you, you got to see a lot of Ellie's scarier side.
I think she's been
someplace where she
darker
can't.
in this episode than she's ever been in previous.
The dark side of the Force kind of stuff. At the same time, her responsibility for Dina begins to show. Ellie's she's a relatively jerk as a person, and she's pretty much doesn't give a shit. But now she gives a shit because she has the baby to think about. Right. And she's like, oh shit, we can't do this because the baby. That's the first time responsibility has really slapped her in the face. So between that and the way they were in the theater, where it wasn't like they were just hooking up all the time. It was like, okay, I got some work to do, you go do something else. And it kind of had this household partnership vibe, right? And that to me felt like some of the best of Ellie. So we have to see some of the best and some of the worst. And part of the reason we see some of the worst is because she's got something that she needs to take care of now. Before Joe was taking care of her, and then she realizes that she's got I don't know that she's capable of taking care of Dina, but she's capable of protecting her in certain ways. And she's like, this is serious now. So, and unfortunately for Nora, she gets the brunt of that realization.
It's quite interesting because Ellie shows caring for Dina, even to start with when they see the dead bodies, and asks her if she'd be willing to turn around, And it diverts from the game, where in the game she cares, but her dedication to Joel and revenge factor is so much stronger. Like she does, like they do show that element where she, decides like, hey, I'm gonna go towards the hospital, but it's throughout the course of the game, it's just there as an ever present thing. Now,
which makes sense on some level, because if you think about it, as you're playing the game, like your mission is to take out the people who killed Joel. There's not a lot of, you're not third person, you're kind of first person, right? I mean, it's a third person game, you're standing behind Ellie, but like the narrative is kind of first person. So you're not deterred. Just kind of like how Ellie woke up and started like immediately going after Abby, right? Instead of taking 3 months. I think when you're doing the show thing, the adaptation gives you room to sort of put those character motivations in place a little bit more firmly than is necessary in a game where the person playing it kind of just wants to go.
That makes
that's
sense.
fair. But I do think that Dina also shows much more grit in the. She's more of a given that she's an actual character, she's much more of a character here than the game, where
she's not just an NPC.
She was a developed character in the game, but you didn't spend as much time with her as we covered in the last episode. She wasn't going with Ellie to continue this. She was
Ellie leaves
sick,
her, right?
And Ellie leaves her because she's sick.
Yeah, she's sick, and then there's also just the idea that like, you get a certain level of, like I was talking about, like Andy was saying, they're BFFs, whatever. There's an intimacy with Dina now that you don't really get in the game. Dina is a reason that Ellie is who she is, but in the show, she's become like a part of Ellie. They're like a tag team.
For sure.
Yeah.
One thing that's also quite interesting is we finally actually have a continuation of that development of Ellie, where we early on get to see her smile and have genuine happiness, which is not something that's happened in a while. Right. So it's quite interesting to see her develop, and also see her develop as a character that gets smarter and sort of a bit more tactical, knowing like, hey, we should Dina, we should leave at night versus like just go. So she is changing. But the question, I guess, will ultimately decide is to what degree will she change by the end of this season and by the end of this full, journey of The Last of Us.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like speaking of changing, this idea that Dina refers to Ellie as a non-school oriented. Did you guys pick up on that? And I thought about that. And it's true. Like we see her kind of like not like back in the day in season 1. There's just like a little kind of montage scene, and she's running in her like sweats during like Fedra school, and she's not into it.
Right.
She's hanging out with Riley, and it kind of comes out that she's never really been good at school. And then we get introduced to Dina, and the first time we see Dina, goes back to Tosin saying that Dina is more of a character in the show than she is in the game. Well, first time we meet Dina, she's learning how circuit breakers work from Joel. And she comes in there and says, how does this work? And he's like teaching her, and she's like super interested. She's like learning oriented. She's triangulating the WLF locations. And given all the technology we have access to today, I don't think the three of us could triangulate shit. So she's a really brilliant tactician. She's bright. Yeah, she's very bright, and she thinks. She just with the sign in the previous episode where she sees the WLF sign marked on the satellite dish, and she's like, "Hey, look, if you see that, it's in a place where they know that you see it, so that you go to check it out and they can take you out." So, but what I really liked was when she runs the odds of being reckless, which is a very abstract thing. We're being reckless against Ellie is sort of like, they have really bad security with their communications. That gives us the edge. And she's like, yeah, but we're stupid. Like we are collectively not the bee's knees here. We're not really going in with a coordinated plan. So it cancels out, and it kind of does. But what I really liked is when Ellie's like, you sure this way is safe? She's like, you don't trust me? She's like, I don't trust Seattle. Well, that goes the other way. It was Dina talking to Ellie. You sure this way is safe? Because Ellie is very much on instinct. And Dina's like, I'd like to get out of here alive. So can we You know, it kind of feels like Princess Leia and Han Solo a little bit. This idea that like Dina is Princess Leia, she's got the plan, she's got the the kind of authority in terms of like knowing how to do something, and Han just kind of like, he flies casual. Isn't that what he said?
Right.
So he and that's kind of like how I was like, we'll figure it out, right? Dina's like, no, can we please stick to the plan? So at the end of the day, the plan goes out the window, and you need Ellie's her improvisational skills in order to at least hold on. Like, run into that cage, I'll use my abilities to all that stuff, and you need
for whatever
to have
good
that,
it did them in the long run.
I mean, it slowed things down, but yeah, when they started ripping that cage open, that's when I had to pause stuff.
Did you notice that though I think Dina is teaching Ellie, because there's that moment when Ellie asks, well, why are the wolves ignoring the warehouse? And Dina, she doesn't say anything. She just stares at her as if she's prompting Ellie to logic it out for herself rather than spoon feeding it to her. And Ellie gets it. This is one of the
things I do with my son all the time. I'm like, well, why do you think? Right. And then if he's unlucky, his little sister's there, and she's like, this is why, and she tells the answer.
So I think some of Dina's smarts are getting through to Ellie just through experience.
Yeah, it's also very human to be like, okay, we got to get on the same level here. We got to get on the same page, not the same level, but the same page. So I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm hoping that you can get there, right? It's a Socratic teaching method, but it's one of the ways that two people together can end up on the same wavelength, and it also gives Ellie confidence.
Can we talk about the spores at the beginning of the episode there? So, as people who have listened to this podcast know, I've played the first game, but I have not played the second game. So I have all of my experience with this property is the first game and this adaptation. So it's interesting that the series is introducing spores at this point, because they were a foundational element of the first game and were completely avoided in the first season of this series. And I'm wondering how this is going to impact scenarios moving forward from here. Because in the first game, the spores were part of the world building, but it wasn't necessarily essential to the narrative. So I'm not surprised that it got avoided in season 1, because logistically it would have been just too difficult to work that in.
They had 7 or 8 episodes to build out the entire world, and the spores were not a necessary component of explaining the expository nature of what's how this world works and then how you get infected. So I think what they did with the spores this episode was actually quite smart. And by that I mean there's a theme in season 2 about the cordyceps changing, right? It's adapting. And when you see Leon Park and whoever else is down there, built into the wall. I think you earlier in the show,
aliens cocooned.
Exactly, you referenced the aliens cocooned people. When you see them attached to the wall, they kind of look as if they might be like, "Help me," but they aren't. This is a great example of when you get on YouTube, look up cordyceps and zombie ants and stuff like that. The fungus makes it changes the machinery. It takes the machinery of a body and it makes it do other stuff. The only way for the fungus to become airborne, it seemed, is to make use of human lungs, right? To have, because every time they breathe, they're turning their head at the person walking by, and then they're not coughing but exhaling. So it's using lungs to take itself and get out there. Not unlike how it would use an ant to transport itself or part of itself from one place to the other. So the show is using it closer to the science in terms of the mechanism, and that was pretty interesting. And in the game, you do have a mask. You see gas mask, which is why Eugene, the husband of the psychologist, he there's a gas mask with a bong on it because everyone had a gas mask. But what's also interesting, so that what's also interesting for me was that So I have some ties to Seattle. I've spent some time there. And I also spent a lot of time in the Mountain West. The average humidity, I looked this up on like humidityandclimate.com or whatever. The average humidity in Jackson is like 50%, right? And that means that there's some days, a lot of days in the 20s and 30s, and a couple days in the 70s, right? In Seattle, the average humidity is in the 70s. And this is totally a thing because when I wash clothes in the Mountain West, I literally hang them, and within 4 hours they're dry.
Sure.
Doesn't matter what time of year. You just put them on a hanger. If it's warmer, you can open a window. But even if it's cold, there's just not a lot in the air. You're putting on lotion all the time just to keep your hands from getting all cracked. When I'm visiting family in Seattle, there's no such thing as that. You better have a dryer or several days to wait. And even then, the clothes are still wet. So if you think about the fact that they had the, Elise Park is talking about how early in the pandemic, they had these early sick people cordoned off and like quarantined down there. And the cordyceps realizes that it's moist enough and wet enough. It's the conditions that fungi really enjoy. Then it can use the fungi in a new way that it really couldn't use in Jackson, right? So it's not super surprising, is my point, that you don't see this kind of like airborne stuff in Jackson. You just see the kind of like land-based tendrils, as opposed to in Seattle in a damp and wet basement with 20 years of growth being able to create the spore situation. So it's like epigenetic almost. It's dependent on environment. It's able to change things. So
I wonder also narratively if the reason they introduced it here in season 2 is it's going to be, those spores are going to be more of important to the narrative in this season than they might have been in season 1. On that,
use them as a plot device now. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I think it's interesting also that the physical presence of the fungi itself didn't seem to be a concerning factor for Park's troops when they were investigating the basement. Just the fact that, but the fact that the spores were in the air was the thing that concerned them. And I'm wondering if that's true of the world in the show in general, that essentially that the fungi itself doesn't give off lethal spores up until, this instance. Because we've encountered
walls with stuff on them,
right? And no one
encountered those pipes with stuff in
was concerned previously about spores, but now it seems like a novel development for the world of this show.
So when you see Nora get in there and she's coughing, she just can't breathe, right? The spores immediately begin to affect her respiratory system. I feel like they might have been going down and doing whatever sweep they were doing, and they started that, and then they wonder why everyone's coughing, and they're like, oh shit. Right. Seal it off. And that is an interesting thing. It's also worth noting, it wasn't like some random kid. Like in Jackson, you can imagine some random kid, playing in an area, then running across spores, and that's a problem for them. But what's interesting about the WLF is that there seem to be no civilians, right? They have a hospital, sure. They've got
it's all soldiers,
but everyone is a soldier. So unlike Fedra World, where you had soldiers managing civilians, in the WLF, everyone is a soldier. It's like it's almost like the Exxon Valdez in Waterworld. Like everyone is a fighter, which makes for a huge force, but it also makes for like zero society. Like how are they? Who's making the ammunition? Who's making the food? They can't be on 25 years of MREs or whatever. So it's just interesting how everyone is a fighter. So everyone is ready, including Leon, to sacrifice.
Right.
Yeah, the intro definitely, as you noted, Andy, sets us up for an evolution of it being airborne transmitted, similar to the game, similar to kind of what we've talked about. But we have constantly one thing they've given us is an evolution of the infected. It's not just what you see is what you get. And so I think I think you're right, Andy, that we're going to continue to see seeing more of that. We're going to continue seeing potentially what happens to those who are on the wall. Do they peel off and become a certain type of infection?
Right.
I think more of that to come in future episodes.
Oh boy,
that's very much, you can see them becoming bloaters or whatever, right? But what's also interesting is, like, this season we've seen the gigantic, monsters. We've seen the tendrils. We've seen the clickers. We've seen the general infected population. Right. We've seen the stalkers. We've seen the stalkers working together, and now we've seen the new mechanism for airborne. So they're really piling on this season, this idea that, like, this thing is an ever-changing situation. Even if you figured out how to, like, survive a couple clickers or whatever, we're raising the level of threat. So that's why, and Andy, you want to talk about this idea that, like, Dina and Ellie, they're like, oh, we can handle this or that or whatever. And even last week they handled this whole situation in the subway. But there's a moment here where they just seem like what?
Yes. Well, I love this idea of Ellie and Dina encountering this escalated crisis that they don't know how to escape from, that they're, we've seen them get out, and Dina has always been real confident about, we've handled stuff like this before. No problem.
She has, right? Yeah, she's totally confident.
And they've demonstrated that. And here you run into, the stakes have been raised, and we've seen them being raised. We've seen them trapped in this situation that we don't know how they're going to get out of. And I love that. However, I feel
Deus ex machina.
I feel a little conflicted about the idea that Jesse comes in as to rescue these two women. I don't know, how do you guys?
It's hard right there. Right? So two things happen for me right there. One, visually, and I was gonna kind of talk about this more in the whole technical aspects. There's this scene in the first or second episode of this season where Joel meets Abby. Abby has a infected on her. She's just gotten through a whole bunch of them trying to get her. She's really about to die, and then it gets taken out, and a hand reaches out. She grabs the hand, and without even knowing whose hand it is, she's like, okay. Right. And that pretty much is what happens here with Jesse. Ellie's fighting him off. It's too many. And then, like, boom, boom. And, like, she's relatively clear. And then a hand comes out, and it's Jesse's hand.
Yeah.
And it's like they're trying to show that. I don't know if that means a foreboding situation for Jesse in the near future, but I do feel like that's the thing. But once they get there, it's pretty clear, like, I came with Tommy, and we're here to get you. And, we're like, oh, you're kind of here to help maybe? And they're like, no, we're here to take you home. And that is very much like two dudes rolling up, being like, we've got the plan, and the plan is for us to not do what you want to do. And It definitely felt like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. You're not here to support me. You're here to take me back. And even though obviously taking them back or helping them get back is to Jackson is the safe move, it is a logical move, it does strike us as something that's like, that doesn't seem right. Even though it's totally the smarter move, right? Especially given Dina's situation. But it was interesting to see they show up, and Tommy's not there right then, but there's certainly a sort of the guys are here, we're serious now, time to go, party's over, That was interesting.
I just don't know how I feel about that, but we'll see. Maybe it justifies itself.
I like Jesse a lot, so I was happy to see that situation, especially because, like, when it comes to, like, the Seraphites are not exactly going to become friends with our team, and obviously the WLF are, and so it was nice to kind of, like, mix that up. I was more surprised that they were in the park and then suddenly she was at the hospital. I mean, I know that was the plan, but the whole park part wasn't really... It wasn't specified in the verbal discussion of the plan. I'm sure if I look back at the map, I'd see that the park is there or something like that. But I was like, oh, she just happens to find herself at the park, at the hospital. How convenient.
By the way, let me just say that perimeter guard is like dumb as hell. Like
the one with the canine.
The one with the canine.
He's got a dog. He's got a dog, and I guess maybe they don't train canines as well in post-apocalyptic world as they do today, but He was like, must have seen a rabbit, or, vermin or something like that. Okay, let's go.
Well, I mean, Andy, you're also assuming that this hasn't happened plenty of times with the dog, right? What's another?
Sure.
It's true. It's true.
And it's very truthful to the game, where it's like they'll go with the dogs to investigate the tall grasses, but if you throw a bottle somewhere, like they'll go after that. So like it's the whole that is very sort of typical.
That was definitely better than the bottle thing. Like 100% better than you throwing a bottle and then like a guy with a dog is like, I'm going to ignore the dog and go check out the bottle. I think the idea that so here's the thing to realize. The women playing Ellie and Dina are like 5'3" max. I think they're both 5'2". They are small people, short people. And the idea of sneaking through a hole broken in a wall in order to keep your eye out, keep someone's eyes off of you. That makes a lot of sense. The second game and its focus on sneaking, it makes a lot of sense when you're this small, when you have this like lower stature. It also was great in terms of subverting expectations, like who's dangerous. Usually we think of like, the guy playing Thor or the guy playing Captain America, Chris Evans, right? And instead you've got these brutally lethal 5'2" people who have made it all the way to Seattle on their own with whatever they encountered. One of them is pregnant and she's still killing people, and which we normally associate with sort of like vulnerable. Not that she's not vulnerable,
but still need to be rescued by their guy from town.
All right, yeah. So like it's interesting in the game, it's not that Jesse's even there. Tommy goes first, leaving the others behind, and then Ellie and Dina go on their own to Seattle. And Tosin, you know what's going on. Yeah,
so Tommy heads out first, and then Ellie and Dina heads out first to go avenge his brother. And then
Joel.
Ellie and Dina head out together. And then separately, Jesse heads out, more of like trying to recover everyone or help them out.
Jesse is the most responsible person, as evidenced by the whole like, you're going to run this place one day anyway. He's like, who am I going to run if you all run away?
Yeah, it was in fact in the game, Maria, who's Tommy's wife, had promised Tommy that he would keep Ellie and Jackson while he goes out and search for Abby, because he had gotten
right.
So
that's a classic Lost move, right? In the show Lost, it's like, I got to go take care of this thing. I'll go with you. No, it's too dangerous. Like, I'm trying to keep you safe. It's like the classic Lost / what's it called? A Walking Dead like conversation.
Right.
And then of course the second group goes out anyway.
Right.
But in this case, for the show, they flipped it. In the show, they make Ellie and Dina sneak out with help from Seth, and then Tommy and Jesse are now coming to not just take out, ostensibly from Jesse's perspective, to bring them all back. But I have a feeling that when we get to Tommy, he's like, nah, let's just kill these motherfuckers. I just can't imagine Tommy not wanting to take the opportunity to take those guys down. But at the same time, Tommy had that conversation with the psychotherapist about how you got to let things go. Like her going out there was not because of Joel necessarily. I mean, it wasn't because Joel taught her to go for vengeance. It's because it's who she is anyway. So we're going to have there are going to be some conversations if Dina doesn't get, gangrene in her leg.
And when Jesse saves them, as you kind of called out earlier, it was similar to that scene with Joel, but also kind of looked as though he was Joel, right? It seemed in Ellie's face that she was like hoping that it was Joel, and then recognized it.
I mean, weren't you a little bit?
I think everybody was a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of like that Inglourious Bastards moment where you like, history didn't go this way, but you're like, okay, I'm all right with this.
I thought it was interesting when Dina and Ellie were walking down the street in Seattle. Dina, Ellie stops Dina and says, we don't have to do this. I should turn you around. You should go, and I'll do this by myself. And Dina rationalizes Ellie's motivation for revenge by telling her, whatever reason Joel gave those people to do what they did, he didn't deserve that ending for him. But at this point...
Right, which is also tied to her like sort of origin story, right? This idea that when she was 8, she came back and there was some sort of marauder in her house in New Mexico, and she effectively had to kill him, and he didn't expect. And this goes back to them being small. He didn't expect an 8-year-old to be the death of him.
Sure.
And then because she saw what that guy was doing to her parents, and so whether or not she was fully asleep during her sedation, or and she missed what happened to Joel, and she knows that Ellie saw it, or whether she experienced some of it because she was sedated but she could hear, which is maybe how she learned everybody's names and like what their relationships were. She's like, I've been through this, and I'm not going to let you go through it alone because I've been through it alone. Right. And so this idea is pretty powerful.
At this point in the story, neither Dina nor Ellie knows exactly what Joel did at the hospital. And you could argue that Joel may have very well deserved his brutal death. And Joel was aware of that. So we haven't, I think it's only in this episode when Ellie confronts Nora that Nora confirms the depth of what Joel did at the hospital by killing everybody, including so up until this point in the story, Ellie,
we didn't really know what Ellie knew.
You know, I don't think we knew because Ellie was out. You know, Ellie was out of it at the hospital. She was sedated. She had no idea. We didn't have any clue. That's why she asked him at the end of the season, you know, tell me that everything you said was true, and Joel straight up lied to her. But here we have verification from Nora that that's what Joel did. And when Dina says, whatever reason Joel gave those people to do what they did, he didn't deserve that. But you could argue that he might have deserved.
Well, I think part of it is the way that he was killed. So it's one thing if Joel rolls in and he shoots a bunch of people.
19 people,
he's like sort of
plus a doctor.
19 people in his military way. And he's none of those people, like, I mean, people might have suffered if the wound wasn't like a clean kill.
Sure.
But like her father, for instance, got popped in the head. He never felt a thing. So I think when she's saying, when Dina's saying he didn't deserve that, I think on some level she's like, he didn't deserve the drawn out torture and then the death with a broken golf club. Like nobody deserved that. You know what I mean? He might have gone and he saved you. If he hadn't saved you, I wouldn't have you now. So there's that selfish part of the whole thing. But when it comes to justice, what Abby delivered was torture. I mean, it was a violation of our 8th Amendment. It was bad shit.
But I will argue at the end of this episode, Ellie takes Nora out in exactly the same way.
Oh yeah, Ellie is visiting that torture. She's giving she's killing her in kind, let's say.
Yes.
But what I think the injustice for Dina was that it wasn't in kind. You know, he took people out and you know, he's running around and he's shooting people.
Yes, but I mean,
19 people.
The question is,
and if you take out 19 people, do you deserve to be tortured? I mean, in our society,
I think that's
today,
a valid question.
Yeah, I mean, in our society today, which theirs is not our society. If you took out 19 people and you weren't justified, so it was considered a murder. If you took out 19 people, you know, you'd probably end up on death row and you'd probably die, you know, one of a few ways, all of which are meant to be humane. The idea that she wanted to give him the pain of 19 people, despite saving her life, by the way, is something that, you know, I think that if there's a lot of people, not everybody, but there's a lot of people in that world, in the world of Last of Us, it's like, that wasn't right, you know, especially he did something bad, but he also did a shit ton of good. Did he deserve to die that way? I mean, Abby was terrible. You know, she's like taking out the golf club. She's killing him with the back of it. She's making sure Ellie watches it. I mean, she's a villain. Even if she becomes a sympathetic villain, the act was villainous.
Okay, but
totally, utterly villainous.
I'm going to argue two things here. First of all, I think that our perspective of whether or not that was that Joel deserved that level of justice, that torture is subjective in relation to the audience's relationship with Joel. You know, if you're looking at it from...
Yeah, it's subjective for sure. I'm just saying when it comes to Dina, if she's like, the way he was killed, he didn't deserve, I have to layer on, okay, what did she mean? And one of the things that I feel like she could have very well meant was being tortured for a couple hours and then like killed the way he was while you had to watch, he didn't deserve that. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
And like you could be, I totally see your argument. I'm just saying if I'm Dina, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
And also, we see clearly that this is that change in attitude is happening to Ellie in real time. That she is becoming the dark that Abby was.
She's fallen to the dark side. Yeah. So she's like, you hurt my papa, and I'm gonna hurt you back. And if she wants to revisit this level of pain on the next, 5 people.
Well, she's already done it to Nora, and Nora, so like when we see Nora at the beginning of this in this episode, she's healing someone. She's demonstrating her benevolence. Yes. She's showing that she has a valid position in the society. Yes,
the bitch
I know.
Stayed home.
Okay, but this I think that the purpose for showing her healing somebody at the beginning of this was to further gray the lines of where Ellie stands morally.
Definitely a dual nature to these characters. If you think about it, they're obviously taking care of each other in their squad, in their tribe, in whatever, and then they're virulent to anyone outside of it who threatens any of those people. But the whole like extraness of having to leave Seattle, travel down to Jackson, and then take the man out brutally, when you don't quite know what's up. Now, so it's clear that Nora knew what's up. Nora's like, you're the immune person, and he killed the only man who could take your immunity and give it to the rest of us, which means on some level, either Nora doesn't know what it was going to take to have Ellie help everybody. Like, it seemed like it was going to kill her, or she didn't care. Right. So either she didn't care about what was going to happen to Ellie because, the needs of the many or the needs of the few or whatever Spock says. Or she was like, oh man, maybe, the WLF propaganda was like, we were going to save the world, but now we can't. And like our people are dead. So it's unclear. But what is clear is that Joel had told Ellie they were going to kill you and I had to stop it. And it made me. And because of that, I had to make a choice. And the choice was to take out a lot of people and save you. And I feel like that's the thing that Ellie is. She knows. She may not know the details, but she's also like, I'm here. I have my freedom. I have my life. And I'm going to deprive you of yours because you irrevocably hurt me. So it's a very messy situation. And we'll see if she can get through, 5 more of those. And,
right.
John Wick would have just shot him.
Sure. Sure.
I think one thing that's interesting is because they hinted at Ellie knowing prior to this, but now you had it confirmed. And, the second that she said, this is the second I know that we get in this episode, right? The first is from Dina, who's essentially kind of interrupting Ellie and Han Soloing her to a degree of knowing that she loves and cares for her. But this second one coming from Ellie is darker, it's set in a sort of a dark silhouette. It's said with, vengeance, revenge, anger intonation. And it's just, I think it was really well highlighted that, especially coming after such a furious chase scene that occurred in the hospital, which also occurred in the game and was just as extensive. So, yeah.
Well, also that chase scene was interesting because in the first season, Joel is in a hospital. Joel has a weapon. Right. Joel is shooting and he's like felling people left and right. It's a precision situation, right? In this scene, Ellie is in the hospital. Ellie is shooting and it's a rando situation, right? She's not hitting anybody. I mean, I was actually surprised because in the game, you're able to aim using the help of a computer. So a lot of those shots really work. But in this episode in particular, they were in the room, the building with all the stalkers, and then Ellie is in the hospital, and it's like they're just shooting bullets, and like nobody's getting hit, which is oddly more realistic when it comes to a handgun, especially a handgun being used with only, while moving with only one of your arms controlling it. But yeah, she kind of just gave herself cover. She actually didn't hit anybody. But to me, it was a stark contrast between Joel and Ellie. Ellie is like low rent Joel when it comes to killing people.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else that you guys want to talk about the episode in general before we move on to the other sections?
No, the
Yeah,
last
just
thing
a
I'd say.
couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say one thing, and it was just that like the moment when Hanrahan and Elise are talking about how Elise had to shut down that corridor. They're talking about airborne cordyceps. They're talking about
Right.
how they're breathing it in. We later see Nora gasping and coughing. And yet the two of them are like, we can't have this thing in the air because it might kill us. And then they start smoking cigarettes.
Right. Well,
like hand rolled. So super. It's not like it just
Right.
happened to be there. Someone
Right.
had to make those cigarettes. And they're just like, I don't want this stuff to come up and go in my lungs and kill me.
well, I mean, I guess the question is, do you want to die quickly or do you want to die slowly? So I guess
Yeah,
it's
totally.
the lesser of
So
two evils.
Exactly. Tosin, what were you going to say?
Just a couple small points. One is when Ellie's singing the lyrics, "If I ever were to lose you," it's just interesting to consider what would come next. What would she do? Would this be sort of like depending on how she lost her, would it be like a protect mission like Joel? What if it was the infected? Would she, self-sacrifice? Those are the sort of things that I wonder what the actual answer is there.
I love how that guitar moment began like it was going to be like another cutscene moment, like the Take on Me from the last episode. But then at the last moment, it subverted into like, we ain't got time for this shit now.
We can't keep on doing this.
She started, those first couple lines, and then it almost was like a very self-conscious, like, no, we're not doing this right now. We know what you think we're going to do, and we're not doing it.
And the last thing the call out is, given that I've had some friends actually message me about this as well, there's no horse in this episode. And
yes, thank God.
Shimmer.
Sort of as a slight spoiler, because I doubt they're going to show this, but skip ahead 20 seconds if you don't want to hear. But in the game, the horse takes on a sort of brutal death. And kind of killed, not by infected, but by by one of these groups, and so I think they wanted to spare us some of the some of that.
It makes for good Seraphite meat.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the Seraphites who took it.
I know.
out,
I'm just saying it could, it could. But yeah, I've had people texting me about the horses, and I'm in kind of horse country where I am. So they did not respect these horses. So there's a lot of that happening in my life.
Speaking of Seraphites, one last thing I wanted to say was in this episode, we finally get a face of the Seraphites prophet on the graffiti on the wall that says, feel her love, which I don't think we've had any sort of iconography of who the Seraphites are worshiping up until this point. And it blows my theory out of the water of being either Ellie or Ellie's mother. So I have no idea who this Seraphite prophet who was supposedly killed 10 years ago or died 10 years ago is supposed to be. But we'll see. I'm hoping we'll see. So let's get into some of the technical aspects. Now, this is where we talk about some of the behind-the-scenes elements we enjoyed in this episode, the music, acting, visual effects, etc. The spore effect that they used in this game, in this episode, looks exactly like the spore effects from the game. So they did a fantastic job of that.
Yeah, it was pretty clear that they were really using. And if you think about it, the game is CGI, so being able to use CGI, but with today's technology and a crazy budget, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, one thing, kind of a small thing, but I kind of like the touch is, when Ellie gets the generator back up in the building that they're at, that is something that happened in the game. Now, granted, she went to the basement and said it was there. In the game, you actually go to more like the roof / top floor, and then you are able to get it. Although there is someone who has died by the generator by accidentally, touching wires that they crossing the streams, so to speak. So you see notes there, but I thought it was just kind of a nice little touch to be like, oh, like they call back to something else that happened in the game.
Totally. For me, it was that scene where Dina ends up in the cage and she hangs her backpack on the hand, like she uses her backpack to lock the door, kind of. But this whole idea of the backpack has the yellow light on it, and then suddenly the light is used to illuminate her and the cage while Ellie's in the dark, you know. And to me that was great because you got to see bright light on Dina's face. You see her horror, you see what she's trying to do. She's shooting the weapon, you can't really shoot anybody. The people are peeling back the metal from the cage, all that stuff. And it's just like this light, this yellow light is on her to remind you that you know, she does represent sort of like the good, and Ellie is falling into the bad. Another thing that was cool that was also in the game was in the game, the Seraphites' whistles are sort of translated for you, right? You learn them over time.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
You know, like, the one type of whistle is like, I see an intruder. One type of whistle is like, hey, I'm here. Okay, you're here. You know, there's like lots of whistles. I don't know. Like there's like maybe 10 whistles,
and
maybe
do you
more.
See the text on the screen? That's wild. Like I love that.
It's really cleverly done. I really like it. And it was one of those things that really kind of got took the game to the next level. You realize obviously the juxtaposition between Isaac saying you guys don't have walkie-talkies or whatever, and they're like they have their whistles, right? And if you're not paying attention, those whistles could sound like nature or whatever. But they used, I don't know if they were exactly the same, but I definitely was like, they're using different whistles to say different things, and that is completely clear. And one of them did sound like I found somebody or whatever. So it was really cool to see them using those effects. I mean, they probably just played the same audio from the game. Sure,
very possible.
Cleaned it up a bit, yeah. But it was great to see. It's good stuff.
All right, some unanswered questions or theories. Again, like I've got a couple of theories here that are completely based on the fact that I have not played the game, so I have no idea what's coming up. But I have this fear that this quest is going to end up in Dina's death as an abject lesson of what Ellie was willing to risk for the sake of revenge, especially after that scene where they're together and Ellie says, you know, you don't have to keep going, you can go back and I'll do this by myself. In fact, you should go back. I just feel like
it's not, if my death isn't on you.
Yes. I feel like that's heavily foreshadowing, right? That Dina's probably going to die in this journey, but who knows? I don't know.
Who knows?
And the other thing is, you know, because of the very one-to-one comparison to how Joel died with Ellie dispatching Nora with the golf club shaped pipe, that tells me that when Ellie confronts Abby, if Abby doesn't kill Ellie first, it's not going to be in the same method. Abby's not going to get it the way Abby gave it to Joel. It's going to be some other method of revenge.
Maybe.
Yeah. Because otherwise it would be repeating the beats, I feel.
I like, I don't know. I'm looking forward to some death and destruction. I know we only have a couple episodes left, so we're not going to see that, but I'm looking forward to it.
And the last scene in this episode, what are we seeing in that? Is that a flashback or a fantasy or like Ellie's dream state?
I think it's a flashback. I think we're gonna.
All right.
I think it's a flashback of the good times. She's taken out Nora, and you know, why is she taking out Nora? The visual narrative is showing because Nora helped take out this guy who loved her, and like who really, aside from Dina, who's ever truly loved Ellie beside Joel, right?
It's true.
Like, and so Nora took that from her, and she's about to take a piece of Nora's ass out with that bite. She's taking out that anger on Nora's ass. For me, I had some questions. Like, for instance, we saw the guitar last episode, Aha's Take on Me.
Right.
It was in a case. It was wrapped in plastic for 20-something years.
Had the little
so it was in great shape.
Silicone packet in it.
Exactly.
Packet.
The desiccant. The anti-moisture, the desiccant for anti-moisture stuff. And then we get into this theater, which has clearly not been taken care of. And she sees these like several guitars, and they're totally fine. She's like, "Yeah,
in the basement, no less."
Yeah, in a basement, or I guess on the stage, right? It looks like there were the cars of the guitars of the people who were. But yeah, it was just kind of like totally like took away from the awesomeness of the find, right? But I guess the guitar that she didn't put back in the case is fine if you can hang out like that for all those years. For me, another one was, yeah, obviously I got to ask where the damn horse was, but
Sure.
there's no answer for that. The whole thing with the stalkers, right? Are they pack hunters? Like, do we know that? Don't we know that? Is that how they're going to evolve in the show? And then finally, these two were not the best shots. She's running through the hospital. She's shooting. She's not hitting anything. And it just kind of makes it all feel a little bit real. In The Walking Dead, there's like a 7-year-old, Judith or whatever, who like walks with like a 357 Magnum on her hip. And she can like take out, the dead or even like living people because she's like been taught from birth that
Sure.
like, you have a gun, you can take them out. And that was weird, That was a weird thing.
So
but here it's
you're wondering
good.
why kids aren't as a well-trained, aren't as good marksmen as they are in The Walking Dead.
Kind of. I mean, I like the fact that it felt real. They were panicked. They were shooting. And when you're panicked and shooting, you're not going to hit. You're going to waste your bullets.
Right.
But at least they kind of got cover when it came to the hospital thing. And yeah, that's those are my questions.
All right.
Yeah, Andy, to note on your point, in the game there's a lot of flashbacks constantly, so I think you're going to from a narrative perspective, like she says, and sort of assumed to be the last scene as she's killing her, that Ellie knows that Joel told that Joel saved her. And I sort of feel like if we follow that same narrative thread and you're seeing that a flashback is the next episode, that you may learn a little bit more of what happened.
So this is going to be like
Nora's feeling Ellie's love for Joel every time that thing comes down.
So this next episode is going to be like the DLC in the first season, the Left Behind DLC, where we're going to get one like compilation of all those flashbacks. Apparently, I'm guessing.
Yeah, or at least
Some
I think
of them,
some of them,
interspersed with what's going on, because they only have so many episodes to tell us, to wrap up the season. So it's probably going to be, interspersed, flashbacks interspersed with like the modern. It'd be nice to see Tommy again.
Yeah.
But anything to get Pedro Pascal on the screen, right, guys?
Absolutely. Yes. I knew he was coming back in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I'll accept it as a flashback, if not as his living character.
Do you guys think that when Ellie says I love you and Dina says I know, do you think that was just for shits and giggles, or was that truly a Star Wars reference?
I mean, I think it was not necessarily a direct reference, but it was a reference in that it's that moment has been so ingrained into our culture that it's become like a common
but
trope.
Not their culture.
They had Star Wars. They had Star Wars in there.
Maybe.
Well, I don't think it was. I don't think it was. It was a Ellie, Dina like reference to Star Wars. I think it's a Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann reference to Star Wars. It's a meta
if you throw
reference.
back on what I was saying before about how Dina's coming across like the princess and Ellie's coming across like Han Solo, it kind of makes sense. But that means it would be a Return of the Jedi reference and not an Empire Strikes Back reference. Right. Because the princess only says I know in Return of the Jedi. So I'm just going to leave that there. But anyway.
So that, finally is going to do it for us for this episode of Quarantine Zone. I'm going to go around the table. I'll start with you, Dwayne. Where can people find your work on the internet when you're not talking about The Last of Us?
Yeah, I mean, you can try to check me out on Blue Sky, Dwayne D. I don't post much, but that's where I am. Tosin, what about you?
You can get me on Instagram at BurntToast45. What about yourself, Andy?
I am Mr. Babyman on all social media platforms, on Blue Sky and X. Our social media account for the show is QZPod. We're on all the major podcast distribution networks, particularly iTunes and Spotify. Again, spread the word. Until then, please drop us an email or tweet us, leave us a comment on iTunes, and we will see you after the next episode of The Last of Us here on Quarantine Zone.
Thanks, guys.